Hello everybody, Susan here with Pumpkin Hill Stampers. I have a Stampin' Show and Tell for you today, and we're going to be working with the Peekaboo Farm stamp set, and I'm going to show you how I put this fun two-layered watercolored washed card together. So we're going to start with the detailed stamping, and then we're going to go into the watercolor techniques. So grab yourself a drink or something to snack on, because this one might take a little while. There's a lot of different layers to work through. Okay? Alright, so we're going to be using soft suede to do our stamping. Then we're going to watercolor wash with Sahara Sand, Pale Papaya, Soft Seafoam, and Balmy Blue. And I'm also going to use a couple of accent stamps from the Tulip Fields stamp set. I'm going to use the tree and the clouds to add some detail to our image. Okay? Alright, so first things first, we're going to start with our basic card kit. We've got a Whisper White card, I have a piece of crumb cake for a mount, and then we're going to stamp on these two pieces of basic white cardstock. Now the smaller one I've already die cut with the rectangular stitched frames, so that's going to be my focal point on the card. This right here, the focal point. So we're going to start by stamping with our soft suede ink, and I'm going to use the wall, like the farmyard wall stamp. Now I've set my grid paper so that I've got this down, so I know I'm going to use my center line as the top of my wall, and I'm just going to stamp this across right about there. Now there is an up and a down on this image. The up leaves spaces in the wall for the paw prints of our critter. For today's I'm using the llama. So again, I'm using my soft suede. I'm just going to hold that still, and I'm going to position the paws in the gaps on the wall and stamp down the head of my llama. Okay, so I kind of made myself a grid on the grid so I could have placement, so I had enough space on the top of the wall for my tall animal, right? And by doing this, I can do multiple cards. So kind of like setting it up on a Stamparatus, but I just used my grid paper. So I have a space where I can continue to work multiple. So I actually am creating this for a demo swap, so I'm going to be making like 18 of these. So for me, this worked out well. Okay, so I've got that done. So I've got my wall and my animal critter all stamped. So before I do any watercoloring, I'm going to go ahead and stamp the background piece too. So I'm bringing in my basic white. So this one is larger, and this one's going to go over the top. So since this one's going to go over the top, I want to be able to have my wall line up, right? So I'm going to use the same setup on my grid paper. This time again, I'm going to stamp at that center line, but I also have the top and the bottom marked off so I know where to place my layer. So now I'm just going to stamp one, and then I'm going to stamp another one next to it. Now it's going to get covered up in the middle, so it doesn't matter if I overlap a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and overlap just a little bit, just so I know I'm lined up. Okay? Alright, so there's our very basic setup for our stamping. Now we're going to go ahead and do some of our watercoloring. So I'm going to bring in an extra piece just so if I get extra messy, I'm not going to be too wet on my base. So first I'm going to start with Sahara Sand. So I've opened my container now. You could squish it like this to get some ink on the lid, so that worked fine there. Otherwise you can use your re-inker and just put a couple of drops in there and then spread it out with your water painters. Okay, so I've just got my water painter brush, and I'm just going to come in. I picked up some of that, and I'm going to very lightly just wash over the wall. Okay, I don't want it to be super wet because I'm not using watercolor paper. I am using the basic white, but I do want to just shade in the wall. It's okay to go over those paws because in the end we're going to color them. And then I'm going to come over to my bigger piece and do the same thing. So I'm just giving it a wash, kind of like filling in the grout. Okay? The grout of the wall, and then we're going to let that section dry for a bit. Okay, while that dries for a little while, I'm going to go ahead and put my ink out of the way. Let my brush dry out a little bit. Now I'm going to come in with my Pale Papaya. I decided to use Pale Papaya for the face color. And I'm using my blender pen to apply this because I want to color the face of my little critter, but I don't want it to be wet and kind of blend with the outline of the animal. So I'm just going to pick up some ink and I'm going to lightly come over here. And I'm going to try to color around the facial features so that I don't blend the ink of the facial features while I'm coloring. But you are going to have to get kind of close. So however you best feel comfortable doing that. So now you could use the Stampin' Right marker in the color, but your color is going to be a little bit stronger if you do that. So in this way I'm able to get it to be a little bit lighter in the face by doing it this way with the blender pen. Okay, so now we've got a nice crisp lined image for the face. Okay, so now just clean off my blender pen just by rubbing it until the ink is cleaned off. I'll be ready for the next project to go. Alright, so now we're going to do watercolor wash for the grass and the sky. So like I said, I'm using soft seafoam. I'm going to squeeze my pad, see if I can get any of that to transfer over. Not much, so I'll use my re-inker. And then I'm using Balmy Blue for the sky. Okay, so neither of those got a whole lot of ink on them. So I'm going to just grab my re-inker and I'm going to drop just a drop or two in there for both of these colors, and then I will use my aqua painter to pick up the color and paint my panels. Okay, so I'm going to start with the green. So I want to dilute that color a little bit too. I don't want it to be super strong. So I'm going to use the water to dilute it. Okay, and my brush seems really, really wet. So I'm just going to bring a tissue in and I'm just going to kind of mop out some of that moisture. Just kind of suck some of the moisture out so I have a little more control over the color. Okay, so now I'm going to come back in, I'm going to pick up that green, and I'm just going to come along and paint underneath my stone wall. So I'm just transferring color to my cardstock. And I don't really mind if it's heavier in some places and lighter in others. It's okay, right? When you see a pasture, it's never all even colored. It's got different pigmentation to it. So I can do it on both panels. And see, I'm just kind of washing across. You can go back and layer more color on. It's fine if you want it darker in some places. Okay, so there's my grass. And then I've got my sky to do. Again, mop this out a little bit. It's not too wet. Just spread out the blue. Just don't want it too dark. Spread out my blue. And I'm actually going to flip these over so I can paint them. And you can see my brush is kind of fanned out. It's a well-used aqua painter. So it lets me leave some kind of intricate brush strokes if you want them. So you can see I'm just kind of swiping my brush across the panel here on the larger one. Just filling in the sky, right? Filling in that sky. Now I need to do it on my smaller piece. And this time, because I'm going to be watercolor washing kind of right up to the edge of my critter, I want to be really careful I don't get too close, because I don't want the lines of my image to get blurred with the water. So I'm going to kind of start on the edge. Kind of going to be careful not to grab that brown edged image, and then I'm going to work in and close but not touching. Close but not quite there. So it's kind of going to leave a little halo effect around my critter. Okay, and I can come back in with a drier brush and add color if I really want it closer up, but I want to be careful not to get too close with the wet tip of my aqua painter. Okay, how's that? Okay, so now I've got my panels, and you can see they are lifting a little bit, so I'm really going to want to let them dry before I put them down on my final project. So at this point I'm going to substitute in this panel that I've already done for this one, because this one really needs to dry. And this one I'm going to substitute as well. Okay, so we'll let the two I just did really dry before I further on with those. So here we go. So these two panels are now dry. So now I'm going to come in with my stamps from my tulip field. So first I'm going to add the tree in the background. So I'm using the same green, right? The soft seafoam. And I'm going to stamp a tree in the background here. Okay, actually you could add more than one if you want. So I'll add 2 to this one. So just that tree is just going to create a little bit of a scenery in the background. And then I've got 2 clouds here on my other side. And again, I'm just going to come in and do color on color and just create kind of a fun detail in the background with those 2 stamps. Okay, simple stamping, but just adding a little more detail over the top. Now I'm going to come in with my soft suede, which was the original color I used when I stamped my critter and my fence, right, my stone wall. And this time I'm going to come in with my aqua painter and I'm going to add color to the stones on the wall. Okay, so I'm just kind of dry brushing some color into those shapes. I'm not worried about filling them in completely, right? Stones kind of get scuffed and marked and have different shades of color and texture in them, but I just kind of want to add a little bit of definition to the wall. And one of the reasons I use soft suede is because, to me, when I use soft suede, sometimes, depending on the colors you pair it with, you kind of get like a warm goldish tone in there, and so I like using it for scenery. It's a brown, but it's not just a brown to me. It's got some hints in it of other colors. Okay, so you see how I'm just adding, my tip is really pretty dry and I'm just kind of adding undiluted ink over the top, but my brush is giving it kind of texture that a normal marker would not. So I'm letting the fibers in my brush add some of that texture and distinction. So, okay, and you can see on my panel, you can see the stones as they were drying, they kind of blurred, and that's okay too, because it's not really the focal point of my project, but it is part of the background imaging. Okay, so there's that one. So now I'm just going to add a little bit more over the top on the top focal point. So this card is kind of fun. It's got the focal point on top, it's got the background in the back, both of which have been stamped and watercolor washed. We're repeating a lot of the imagery and the colors, but the focal point, when we put them up on pop dots, is really going to pop and draw your attention. Alright, a couple more stones and then we'll go on to putting it together. Alright, good. So, brush this down. Now, I have one more piece to do in here. I am going to come in with my Stampin' Right marker, and I'm going to just color in my hooves on my critter. Okay, so now, we're good? We're good there? So now I need my card base and my mount. I'm going to go ahead and clear off my mess mat there. So for these layers here, I'm just going to use my liquid adhesive. So I'm just going to add liquid adhesive to the back of my large panel. And adhere that to my crumb cake. Okay, I'm just framing that in. Pressing that down. And then I'm going to repeat that process again. Add that to the front of my card base. Again, just creating a frame. Okay, now this guy is going to get dimensionals. Now remember, I have my fences so that hopefully they'll line up from front to back. So I need to put this over the top in the center. And you can see I'm hiding some of that background, but that's okay because it's background, right? It's not the focal point. So there's that. Now I want to add my sentiment. So I have the sentiment, Life is Better With You, which just comes from the Peekaboo Farm Suite. And I'm going to stamp it with my dark soft suede color. And you can see I put it on the edge of one of my blocks because I really want to have control and be able to stamp it down here under my focal point. Okay, and I did that last because I wanted to make sure that this was all lined up and then that this would fit underneath. If for some reason I had misjudged, I could always put this on another piece of cardstock and then put it over the top. So I didn't do it until last on purpose this time. Okay, which may be a little backwards to the way we do a lot of our crafting, but for this one, it was kind of important to do it last. So there you go. So what do you guys think? There's my Peekaboo Farm watercolor washed project. And you can see you're going to get different results by doing that watercolor wash and placement. So each one's going to be a little bit different, a little bit unique. Alright everybody, so I hope you enjoyed the show and tell. I hope you liked our little refresher on watercolor washing and creating backgrounds with that technique. And if you love critters, like a lot of my friends do, this one's a great little set that lets you build all kinds of fun little scenes with our multiple critters. So leave me a comment below, let me know you enjoyed today's tutorial. Whether you're here on YouTube or whether you're over on my blog, you can leave comments, and I appreciate knowing that you guys are watching and enjoying. If you have any questions, please ask. And if you're shopping, please use my link over to my online store. I appreciate your patronage. It helps me continue doing what I'm doing so I can share more projects with you. Alright everybody, until next time, do some fun stamping. See you again soon. Bye-bye.